Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Sahar Al-Fayfi, your host for this evening and a volunteer of Diwan London and Al-Qist. I am an anti-Islamophobia campaigner. I am also a civil rights activist. If you have not heard about Diwan London is an organization that brings together people who are seeking for universal values of freedom and justice, especially in the Arab world. We are aiming to create a platform where differences can be negotiated and where dialogues can be taking place to raise the social and political consciousness, allowing criticism and also allowing free debate. So thank you, all of you, for attending our event. It is absolutely a great pleasure of me and the organizers here that you are all here. But before we start, I would like to start with some house rules before introducing our speakers. So just to let you know that there are 2 fire exits in this hall, one at the back on my left-hand side and one on the right-hand side. The toilets are outside this hall, downstairs, and there will be tea and coffee at 7:40. For those who pray, can also pray at that time at 7:40. Also, there is information sheet that you might have seen at the registration or taken. This information sheet includes the links of the website for Diwan London and Al-Qist. All what you have to do is to take your phone out and take a picture of the QR. It also has the UN report and also the recent Al-Qist annual report. So I really, really highly recommend that you visit these links and websites after these events. The hashtags for tonight are 2 hashtags. Make sure that you tweet about this event without interrupting the program. So the first hashtag is Stand with Saudi Heroes. Stand with Saudi Heroes with no spaces in between. And the second hashtag is Justice for Jamal. So let's start the event. The UN report by the Special Rapporteur Anas Kalamad into the killing of the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, published on the 19th of June, found Khashoggi was the victim of premeditated extrajudicial execution, overseen, planned, and endorsed by high-level officials, including the Crown Prince himself, Mohammed bin Salman. And this constitutes an international crime meriting international action. When the report was presented by Ms. Kalamad at the UN Human Rights Council back on the 26th of June, some of the next possible steps were discussed, including to impose sanction, exercise universal jurisdiction, and to carry out a UN-led criminal investigation determining individual liability. Such an investigation is particularly vital given the domestic trial taking place in Saudi Arabia that is failing, absolutely failing, to adhere to the basic international standards. So how can justice for Jamal be fully realized, and how can the climate of impunity in Saudi Arabia, which enabled the crime, to be addressed? And what are the consequences if the Saudi regime manages to escape and avoid accountability? So to answer these questions, I really would like to welcome our special guest speakers, Anas Kalamad. Thank you very much, Anas. And Karen Atiya. And Khadija Jenkins. And of course, the founder of Al-Qist, Yahya Asiri. So before we start the main speeches, if I may ask Yahya Asiri, the founder of Al-Qist, to give a speech and small welcome. Thank you very much, Yahya.
Thank you very much, Sahar, and thank you very much for our speakers and our guests here. And thank you very much for every single person here and everyone behind the screens watching this event. why we are here. I'm not going to take long time from you because I know you want to listen from our panelists and you want to ask them some questions at the end of this event. But I will answer the question why we are organizing this event and why we are here, what we want from you. First of all, the crime of the murder for Jamal Khashoggi, it is not the first crime from the Saudi regime. And it is not the last one as well. The Saudi regime, they started the crimes long time ago, and we have seen crimes everywhere, not just inside the country, but also outside the country. Before the murder for Jamal Khashoggi, they arrested all the human rights defenders, and they tortured some of them, and some of them they faced sexual harassment, and they started the war against Yemen, and there is mass executions. Several times happened inside the country, and they kidnapped prime minister for another country. So lots of crimes inside and outside the country. But MBS, before the murder for Jamal Khashoggi, he success to do amazing PR for himself in the international media. But after the murder for Jamal Khashoggi, people around the world, they started to ask about the crimes and the violations happening in Saudi Arabia. At the moment, we can't do internal pressure on the regime. The internal pressure, it's something so difficult at the moment because every single person inside the country who is able to say to MBS no or to criticize what the regime doing, they are behind the bars. The only pressure can happen, the pressure from outside the country. And we know the allies for the Saudi regime, they supporting the regime, and they want to continue the business with the regime without disregard the violations from the regime. So every one of you, you can pressure your politicians here. You can pressure also the media to stop doing PR for MBS and to present him as a reformer and to highlight the crimes and the violations for the Saudi regime, because the dangerous from these violations is not just for us. Yes, we are looking for democracy in our country. We want to stop the violations. We want to protect the human rights inside the country, but not everyone in the world keen to support us in that. But the Saudi regime at the moment, they're not just risking our rights, they're risking the life for everyone around the world. And we have seen what's going on, for example, in Yemen. It's the worst tragedy in the world. So what we want from you to pressure your countries, your politicians, your media, to stand with the Saudi heroes behind the bars and to remind the people around the world about the crime for about the murder for Jamal Khashoggi, and to ask the justice for Jamal Khashoggi. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yahya Assiri, for your speech, and thank you very much for your call and urging the people to participate and take an active role to put more pressure on the Saudi regime to bring the criminals of killing Jamal to justice. So our next and our main speaker for tonight is Ms. Anis Kalamad, is a French human rights expert and special rapporteur on extrajudicial summary or arbitrary execution at the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for the Human Rights. She's also the director of Columbia University's Global Freedom of Expression project. She recently issued the report about the investigation into the unlawful death of Mr. Jamal Khashoggi. Her detailed report offers both findings and recommendations to the international community to enable accountability for this murder and the violation of the international law and norms it presents. Thank you very much, Anis.
Thank you very much, Neha and Sahar, Hatice, Karen. It's a pleasure to be here, pleasure to be with three very strong women and one strong man too. Pleasure to be meeting you and to telling you more about my report into the killing of Mr. Jamal Khashoggi. I suspect you may have heard about it already through the media, so please forgive me, but I'm going to repeat a few things and then try to focus much more on what's next. So I decided to undertake an inquiry into the killing of Mr. Khashoggi back in December, when I realized that there was nobody within the United Nations who was going to make that step. And it felt to me that a crisis such as that of the killing of Mr. Khashoggi could not be left unanswered from the standpoint of the multilateral instrument that we have at our disposal, which is the United Nations. I took the liberty of my mandate as a special rapporteur. I interpreted my mandate in a way that made it possible for me to undertake that inquiry, and I have to say, so far nobody has objected to the way I interpreted my mandate. I started my inquiry in January through a mission to Turkey, where I had the great pleasure and honor to meet with Hatice. And I then went on to have many meetings in Washington, D.C., in Ottawa, in Paris, London, Berlin, and in Sweden, as well as meetings with families and friends of Mr. Khashoggi in different parts of the world. On the basis of the evidence I've collected, I produced a report which I made public on the 20th of June and reported back to the Human Rights Council on the 26th of June. What did I find? I'm going to just highlight quickly the main findings. The first key finding is that the killing of Mr. Khashoggi was a state killing. There were a number of theories associated with this killing. The Saudis, the President of the United States have suggested that it was a rogue killing. There is nothing in the killing of Mr. Khashoggi that could lead to any other conclusion but that it is a state killing. I reached that conclusion by looking and analyzing the jurisprudence and the standard on what constitutes a state act. There is, in fact, a great deal of work on the topic, maybe too much. But in a nutshell, it's state agent using state resources, is more or less what constitutes a state act. In order for an act to be determined to be an individual act, I would have had to prove that the killing of Mr. Khashoggi was only driven by individuals' motivation, using their own resources to conduct the killing. And everything we know about the killing demonstrates that there is no way that definition of an individual act could work for the killing of Mr. Khashoggi. 15 agents working for a security agency flew to Turkey, 8 of them in a private jet which had diplomatic clearance. 2 of them had diplomatic passports. They checked in an hotel, in various hotels that were paid for by and through state resources. The killing took place in consulate, another state location. They used the consulate vehicles to carry out some of their activities. The consul himself used the power of his position to ensure there were no witnesses to the killing on the floor at the time it occurred, and they enticed Mr. Khashoggi by using, again, a state reason, which was to get a document. So there is no other conclusion but that the killing of Mr. Khashoggi was perpetrated by Saudi state agent using Saudi state resources, and that means that the killing of Mr. Khashoggi is a state killing. Deplorably, regrettably, thus far, the state of Saudi Arabia has refused to acknowledge its responsibilities as a state and has refused to apologize as a state to the victim's family, to Turkey, and to the United States, which in my view were also parties to the killings, state parties to the killings. The circumstances of the killing of Mr. Khashoggi make it even more exceptional in that, in addition to violating his right to life, the state of Saudi Arabia also committed an act of enforced disappearance. The body has not been found yet, which means that it is still an enforced disappearance under international law. The circumstances of the killing, according to the committee that monitor the implementation of the Convention Against Torture, has concluded that this was also an act of torture. In addition, the killing was committed in the consulate in violation of the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, and it was also perpetrated violating a very crucial dimension of international relations, which is a prohibition against extraterritorial use of force in times of peace, which is part of the UN Charter, Article 2.4. For all those reasons, I have also concluded that the killing of Mr. Khashoggi is so serious that it should be seen to constitute an international crime for which universal jurisdiction attract. If that was not bad enough, the next steps after the investigations were also, is also an indictment of the state of Saudi Arabia. The investigation conducted by the 17 agents of Saudi Arabia that were flown into Turkey after the killing. The first ones arrived on the 6th, and they remain in the crime scene until the 15th. Those individuals most probably collected evidence, but they also cleaned the crime scene. There are two factors that showed that the crime scene was cleaned. First of all, some evidence that a team of cleaners was, in front of many people, in fact, was sent by Saudis on the 15th in the morning and cleaned the crime scene. Second of all, there was almost nothing that could be collected after the murder by the Turkish investigators. And when you know the circumstances of the killing, the only conclusions are twofold. A, the killing was so well planned that there was no blood, no body parts that was left. Or B, that it was so thoroughly and forensically cleaned that nothing could be found afterwards. Either way, that points to premeditation, planning, and state responsibilities. For the botched investigation, there is no other way for the state of Saudi Arabia but to conclude and to acknowledge its own responsibilities. Let me also add that the failure to investigate properly a killing constitutes in and by itself a violation of the right to life, for which the state is responsible. Having demonstrated that the state is responsible, the next question is then who within the state? The state is a big thing. Saudi Arabia is insisting that it has put to trial 11 individuals, and what I am saying is that that's one thing. There were 11 of the 15 that were present in Turkey. However, when you have to consider, when you look at state responsibilities, you need to look at a variety of forms of responsibilities. That includes not only who ordered the killings, but also who may have incited the killing, directly or indirectly, who may have known about the killing but failed to take actions to stop it, failed to take action to prevent it, and failed to take action to respond to it adequately. All of those forms of responsibilities must be investigated To date, they have not been investigated. The end product is that the 11 people on trial right now are fairly low-level individuals. One particular person that was even named by the Saudi prosecutor, namely Saud al-Qahtani, as having incited the team before it left, asking them to bring back Mr. Khashoggi, and an abduction is a crime under international law. That person has still not been charged and is therefore not facing trial. So all in all, the killing of Mr. Khashoggi highlights the multiple failures of the state of Saudi Arabia in terms of its response, but it also highlights its active role in the commission of the crime. So what's next? What shall we do next? In the report, I highlight a few set of recommendations. Of course, we are always very keen on judicial accountability. That's usually what we mean by justice. I think it's important. I do spend a lot of time in the report talking about justice in the classical sense of the word. I do believe it's going to be difficult to get it, at least certainly not out of Saudi Arabia, but I do believe it's important to keep asking for it. For this reason, I have suggested, one, that the United Nations Secretary General appoint a team of criminal law experts who will have the mandate to identify individual liability for the killings, the botched investigation, and so on, as well as to identify the best mechanisms to deliver accountability. There are many questions around jurisdictions, around location for a trial, and those should be answered, I believe, at the international level. I've also suggested that the United States, that has a wounded interest in the killing of Mr. Khashoggi, has the jurisdiction, or at least the interest, to take action, either through an FBI investigation, to a civil law investigation that individuals may carry forward, through the declassification of CIA and other materials regarding responsibilities. All of those things, I believe, can be done and should be done at the United States level. Thirdly, I have also called for other states to use universal jurisdiction to try and investigate whoever may come on their territory who may have a role to play. So that's for the judicial accountability process. It's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult, but we can get to truth. We may not get people indicted, all of them, but I think truth-telling is very important. Turkey should at some point make public all of the information in its disposal, and there will be also more truth. So truth-telling, we need to keep asking for truth, even if we cannot get top officials facing their day in court. In addition, though, justice can have many other shapes and forms. It can be diplomatic, it can be political, it can be financial, it can be symbolic. So there are a range of options there. I have suggested that individualized sanctions, in my view, at this point are ineffective unless they can aim at higher than the current people. So that should include the Crown Prince until and unless there is evidence he had nothing to do with the crime or with the botched investigation, something I very much doubt, at least the botched investigation. Individualized sanction, state sanctions at that level. Based on my work, I have suggested that there should be a moratorium on the export of surveillance technology to Saudi Arabia, because the state has demonstrated time and time again that it cannot be trusted with this technology and that it is using it to violate human rights, including the human rights of dissidents abroad. I have also recommended more diplomatic actions, most recently around the G20, which in my view should not be held in Riyadh at this stage, but in a different location. I've also called for more symbolic steps to be taken in the name of Jamal Khashoggi, steps that will include a special fund for the protection of press freedom and democratic values in the Middle East, action that could be taken around the world, such as statute and renaming streets, all of that which will allow us to pay homage to a man who paid the highest price for his belief in press freedom and democratic values. I also would like to insist that when we do that, we also fight for ourselves. What the killing of Mr. Khashoggi has shown is the propensity and the capacity of our government, the people we elect, unlike Saudi Arabia, of our governments to move on, to ignore our calls and clamors for justice. That was made painfully clear in Osaka with this photo that all of you have seen. I welcome at least Mrs. Merkel at the decency to set aside herself as far as possible from some of those individuals. We need to understand that when the head of our governments refuse to hear what the public opinions have asked, refuse to act on what the court of their countries have ruled, refuse to act on what the Congress and the Senate of those countries have demanded, what they are doing is creating a huge democratic deficit. And what is happening is the trickling down of authoritarian practice in Saudi Arabia in our own societies through the influence and the power of a state such as Saudi Arabia in the name of economic interest or geostrategic interest. That is dangerous. That democratic deficit must be tackled, and that can only be done by us here and elsewhere, by continuing to put the pressure on our government to ask that what they do it in our name, and that means looking and acting now so that justice for Jamal can be delivered. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ines Kalamad. Absolutely powerful findings and great recommendations. You covered the different types of sanctions and urging everyone to take an action, which is the main message of this conference. Just to let you know that we will be asking each of the panelists questions, but then after the break, you will have the opportunity to ask your questions. So if you are from certain media platform or channel, after the break, you may ask your question. So I would like to move now to our second speaker, Karen Atiyah. Karen Atiyah is the Global Opinions Editor at The Washington Post, where she commissions and edits commentary on global issues from a variety of international writers. Notably, she recruited the Saudi writer, the journalist of today's event, Jamal Khashoggi, to The Washington Post in late 2017. After his 2018 murder, she helped campaigns for answers and accountability. She joined the Post in 2014 as a digital producer in the opinions section. Atiyah often writes on issues relating to race, gender, and international politics, with a special interest in Africa. Previously, she reported as a freelancer for the Associated Press while based in Caribbean. Atiyah was a Fulbright scholar to Ghana and holds a master's degree in international affairs from Columbia University. She receives her bachelor's degree in communication studies from Northwestern University. So thank you very much, Karen, for today. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Diwan London and Al-Quds. And I want to reiterate that I feel very privileged and honored to be sharing the stage today, Agnes, and with Khadija. This is the first time we're all together in the same space addressing you all, and I've been extremely grateful for your efforts and your bravery and your strength, girl power in the face of a lot of male cowardice, frankly, in this whole situation. To start off with, I think that, as the introduction noted, I met Jamal in late 2017, and at that time at the Post, we were very keen to understand what was happening in a very rapidly changing Saudi Arabia. And his voice was being quoted often in other reports, and I saw that and I said, well, okay, why not try to have him over to our side? And he was very quick to say yes. There was almost little hesitation, or very little hesitation to write for us. And I think over the course of our time together, the short year that we had, what stood out to me was this transformation and this man who had been so close to the regime and had decided to make a different choice, as he said in his first op-ed, this choice to leave his family and to leave his home and everything that he knew in order to be free, and in order to shine a light on a number of the reformers who are sitting in prison today, Lujain Hathloul, Aziza Youssef, Essama Zaman in Saudi Arabia. He decided to use that space and that platform that he had to draw attention to that, and also to draw attention to the very sort of human struggle of his choices, of the choices that you make in giving up your privilege, your power, your position in order to speak out for others. And so that was something that was extremely inspiring to me, but I realize that we're here to talk about his killing and about his murder, but I, perhaps as an editor, I'm extremely still protective of his words and protective of the person and the man who he was. So I agree with Agnes, the more that we continue to speak about his ideas and to speak about his writing and to speak about just basically what his mission was, is another form, I think, of justice. So, to go back to the sort of journalism aspect of this, I think one thing that was important about Jamal taking that pivot and ending up at the Post, I mean, two things really, is that there's a sense that America is safe, Washington is safe, working for the Washington Post is a cover, right? To work at a place that has the resources and the history and the prestige, of the Post, which is why so many of us are attracted to working there. I think it's something that we all really felt was a way to protect him. Come October 2nd, we realized that was not the case. And so I think as far as, sorry, a little too close. I wouldn't necessarily say it was a sort of coordinated strategy. I think for a lot of us, especially for myself, we had to speak out. This wasn't just Jamal's disappearance and killing. This was an attack on the Washington Post, and I think for a lot of the American media, this was an attack on our American media and our American institutions. And I was incredibly, and still have been incredibly, really it's remarkable how Jamal in some ways was adopted by the American media, the amount of coverage, the amount of column inches, of hours, media minutes given to this story was not something that I expected. That being said, I think, if Jamal were here, and I always say, as grateful as I am to be sharing this stage and having this opportunity, Jamal should be here, and Jamal should be the one speaking to all of you today about what is happening in Saudi Arabia. And if he was here, he'd be the first one I'd be WhatsApping to call and make sense of all of this. Is that there are so many voices that have been speaking, and Arab voices, even Saudi voices, that have been speaking and writing and sort of screaming about what's happening in the Arab world. And I think one thing that I would hope as far as changes and justice are concerned going forward for my industry, for the media industry, is that it shouldn't take martyrs. It shouldn't take brutal murders and killings in order for us to understand and listen to those who are living under these regimes and telling us that they can't breathe under this, and telling us that our governments, my government sitting in Washington, supporting repressive dictators because they present a choice of either living under terrible leadership or terrorists. Jamal always said that was a false choice, and I think one of the challenges that Jamal's death should pose to the media industry is, will we be more sensitive to those sort of stories? Are we going to begin to not just focus on the top-down, the palace intrigues of Saudi Arabia, Gulf countries in general, but are we going to start paying attention to the people, the Saudi people, the Saudi activists? Those are the real reformers, and those are the real modernizers. And I think as my time with Jamal showed me and showed us through his writing, is that he was questioning this whole time what sort of Saudi Arabia was happening under Mohammed bin Salman. So I think where we stand now, I guess I can speak as the token American on the panel. It has been, I agree, that what this episode has shown so far, this resistance to the public pressure and the outcry from the media, and I've heard from ordinary Americans all around the country who have been, this story has hit them in a way that few other stories do, but that our government in Washington has been so resistant to this pressure to stop the arms sales in Yemen, to recalculate and recalibrate the U.S.-Saudi relationship, to use the power that we have in order to pressure for values or for changes, has been quite saddening and scary. Because as it was said before, it's not just Jamal, this hits close to home, but it's not just Jamal. Why we fight so hard for Jamal is because, for me as a journalist, in these times when we are called the enemy of the people, fake news, this is a fight for journalism. But I don't want to only make it a sort of just a press freedom issue. This is about the freedom of people to say what they want, to tweet what they want, to blog what they want, to draw, and to speak about what they want without fear that they will be executed for it. And I think exactly it is this, this is what the fight is about. It's literally a fight, I think, for our lives. So as far as the post goes, I mean, we've been committed to pushing this story, to reminding people about Jamal and redirecting them to read his work. And I think what has been intriguing about this is that in a lot of ways we've had to pick up some of that democratic deficit. We've had to put a lot on the line in order to pick up where our governments are failing us or are actively undercutting us. But with that, I always tell people when it comes to journalism, it's not just us. We rely on people. We rely on whether it is people to speak their truth in order to put the truths out there so that they can be challenged. Whether it is, again, pressuring lawmakers to support bills that would introduce sanctions on Mohammed bin Salman and those at the top level. I think there is also when we do talk about the United States, we do tend to focus again on governments. I also think when we talk about the role of America in this case, it's also the business community. It's also, again, Mohammed bin Salman has been very vocal about legitimizing his rule through, whether it's Hollywood, whether it's McKinsey, whether it, I think we run the risk of not forgetting or not thinking about the whole of, kind of a whole of American society response. There's a lot of other powers that be there also supporting this regime, whether it's doing PR, whether it is buying up newspapers here in the UK. And so I think there's a lot more that can be done to ask these questions of Wall Street, to ask these questions of Silicon Valley, and to ask these questions of our academic institutions that are complicit in looking the other way despite these abuses. That being said, I do think that in our country we have an election coming up next year. There's an opportunity for some sort of reset. And the importance of making this a presidential campaign issue cannot be overstated. Again, you remember, this is one of the foreign policy stories that Americans tuned into almost around the clock. And if they can remember that this is just as much a referendum on our American values, the freedoms, basically the freedoms that Jamal died for, were the same freedoms that we say we send our military over to protect, that we say our flag represents. What good is all of that if we cannot stand behind our own values and protect, at the very least, a U.S. resident who was murdered inside a consulate? And I also, one last thing is, it's not just Jamal, that there are continued attacks. There's hacking and surveillance on American journalists, on UK journalists. There have been reports of attempts at luring other people in the US back to Saudi Arabia. So this culture of impunity is something that is transnational, and I think should be framed as a security issue, as a national security issue. So with that, I think I'll leave it at that, and I'm sure you guys will have more interesting questions than I do have statements. But again, thank you all so much for coming and for hearing me out.
Thank you very much, Karen. Really, really appreciate it. It is indeed not only a fight for journalism, but a fight for freedom of speech, not only for Jamal, but for all of us. Really, really appreciate how principled you are and how inspiring you are. Thank you very much. Our final speaker, and I'm absolutely honored to share a platform with this strong, emotionally strong woman, Khadija Cengiz. Khadija Cengiz, as you know, is a journalist and a Turkish researcher on Omani affairs. She was the last one who saw Jamal, and she was the first witness to the brutal murder of Jamal. Perhaps, and quite frankly, without her waiting for Jamal outside the consulate in Istanbul, we might not know anything about what has happened. So all the gratitude and appreciation to this strong woman, Khadija Cengiz. So over to you, Khadija.
Thank you. I would like to thank all those who are here today from the bottom of my heart, especially Mr. Yahya and Sahar and Agnes Kalamar and Karen Atiyah. Still, I'm studying English in London right now, and my English is not very, very good for explain my emotional situation. So that's why I will speak. I will read. I have a very little speech today. Everybody know here my emotional situation. They do not need any word. I don't find any word for explain my heart and my emotional situation. Anyway, it's been 9 months since the horrible murder of Jamal. The UN report on the murder of Jamal is a positive step forward, and I would like to ask you all to use this report as a means to prevent an attempt to silence us or push the matter under the carpet. All of us, especially those who prepared this report, demand that those responsible for this murder are found and that international trial based on evidence indicated in the report is set up. These days we see that concepts such as world peace, human rights, and freedom of expression in the world are values that are transferred from the West to the East. We know how important these values are primarily in the United States. All of Europe and the diplomatic immunity is very respected. One of the most sincere and innocent advocates of these values was a journalist who was brutally murdered. If we do not take a human and moral stance against this crime, it will take everyone into a darkness from which there is no way back. It's our duty and obligation to say that human rights and international human values precede all kinds of political and economic interests, regardless of the cost of this crime. We have come together today, one more time, to remember that this report, which was published by the Human Rights Unit within the UN, should bring a more serious voice to this matter. We invite the all European countries, and especially United Kingdom, to take this report more seriously in a political way and take steps that would follow with a more serious action. Unfortunately, since the release of the report, there have been no serious steps against the criminals who have done this, or support from the member states of the Security Council. Doesn't your silence towards this report and this murder give you any fear that such events will continue in the future? It's too dangerous to behave as if nothing has happened. Are you not afraid that the criminal and those who have committed this murder are walking free? And are you not concerned that things like this can happen again? To all the consensus heads of states everywhere in the world, and to all the people who continue to struggle for basic human values, I address you here today, not only with the pain of Jamal's loss, but also in the name of our future concerns. I'm asking for a better future and a more peaceful world, and I'm asking for the justice for Jamal and all the other Jamals of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Khadija. May God bless you and give you more strength to face the pain that you're going through. Now, what we're going to go and do next is that we're going to ask a question to each of the speaker for 2 rounds. So we'll start with Anas, Khadija, and then Karen, and then a second round. Then we'll go to break, and then you can ask your questions after the break. So my first question to Anas: we have discussed the culture and the environment of the impunity that the Crown Prince and the criminals who were involved are actually fostering at. My question to you: what are the risks if such hideous crime is passed passed by without any kind of sanctions? You know, can such crime be replicated? Can this crime affect the European Union, the international community? What are the risks if it passed by?
Thank you very much. You know, I think Khadija answered that question when she asked, when she pointed to the risk for our future that impunity will create, and all the Jamals of the world, the future ones, that's who we need to care for now when we fight for justice for Jamal. So, I mean, I think it's a bit a redundant question. I think you know that the answer is, of course, if we don't take action and if we don't voice a clear disapproval, but more than that, if we do not demonstrate that this kind of killings have a price and that the state responsible should pay the price, then we're sending the very wrong message to that state and to others, of course, that killing journalists, you know, if you can withstand the anger, then things will come back to normal fairly quickly. So that's a message that head of state or some head of state are keen to send, along with the notion that if the state is powerful and has a lot of money and is buying a lot of weapons, or is very important for geostrategic reason, then we should all keep silent. So that is a message that we must stand against. And I have to say, for the last 9 months now, people have repeatedly said to their government, we cannot abide by this message and we do not agree to this message. It's not only because I have written that report. You know, there are many very good reports written by the UN that do not capture the attention in the way that report has. It's because there is a great deal of anger, there is a great deal of desire to see justice being delivered. There is a great deal of understanding that justice for Jamal means justice for the woman driver, means justice for the disappeared journalist who suddenly appeared last month, means justice for the people of Yemen, means possibly justice for the demonstrators in Sudan. So the ripple effect of asking justice for Sudan are multiple, and we've got to fight for it. So yes, silence is not an option. Speaking up is required, but not enough. We now need to act, you know, and the urgency is there. We have evidence with the killing of Jamal and with others that governments are getting more aggressive in their handling of critique and of independence of mind. We have evidence of a degree of ruthlessness against free voices and free spirit that must be taken to heart, and we need to tailor our response to the worsening of the environment. You know, I'm not saying that we need to become more aggressive ourselves, at least not in a physical way, but I certainly think that it cannot be business as usual. We need to reinvent ourselves as well in the current struggle and in the current context. That's a challenge for all human rights activists and for all human rights organizations.
Thank you very much, Ines. Thank you very much for answering the question. The next question to Khadija. In the report published by Ines, there is a claim that Jamal was asked to write a message to deceive the public that someone else committed the crime and it wasn't the consulate had you not been there waiting for Jamal outside, this could have been undercover and no one knew about it. And I know that you've been under a lot of pressure and harassment, especially from the social media. So we'll just wait for the translation. And so the question is that they trying to silence you. Will they ever silence you? Will you ever quit on this cause?
Ya açıkçası şu ana kadar sosyal medya dışında Suudi Arabistan hükümeti ya da yetkilileri tarafından herhangi bir şekilde bir tehdit ve benzeri bir açıklamayla karşılaşmadım.
So Jailin, can you take the mic? Yeah.
It's not working.
Okay, if you use this.
At this point in time, I haven't been silent. I haven't been tried to be silenced by Saudi officials.
Yalnız olayın gerçekleştiği 2 Ekim tarihinden bu yana geçen süre içerisinde sosyal medyadan çok büyük bir hakaret ve buna benzer böyle bir linç kampanyası yürüttü bazı Suudi Arabistanlı troller. Onun dışında bu meselenin benim Suudi Arabistan konsolosunun önünde beklediğim o saatlerden bu zamana kadar geçen süre içerisinde sosyal medyadaki troller dışında ciddi bir Suudi Arabistan tarafından aldığım bir tehdit olduğunu söyleyemem.
There hasn't been any serious threats by Saudi officials, but during Twitter there has been a lot of trolls and a lot of hate that I have received.
Bunun dışında yani böyle bir şeyin olması yani benim bir Twitter kullanıcısı olarak ilk defa karşıma çıkan bir şeydi. Bu inanılmaz yani başlarda şaşırtıcı olsa da benim için hiçbir anlamı olmayan, hiçbir şey ifade etmeyen ve bu meselenin aydınlığa çıkması, kavuşması için hiçbir şekilde bir mani durum arz etmeyen bir şeydi. Biz yapmamız gerekenleri yaptık. Konuşmamız gerekenleri konuştuk ve medya olması gerektiği şekilde bu konuyu aktardı bütün dünyaya.
Initially this did shock me, but this didn't stop me at all, and the media, this won't stop me going forward, and the media, we have told them what was needed to be said, and they have transferred, they have spoken about that.
Yani Suudi Arabistan hükümetinin görevlendirdiği troller dışında bu konuyla alakalı herhangi bir olumsuz bir şey olmadı şu ana kadar medyada. O da beni gerçekten hiç etkileyen veyahut da ilgilendiren gündeminde olan bir şey değil.
Apart from the trolls that Saudi that have threatened me, that hasn't affected me at all.
Thank you very much, Khadija, and thank you very much for your strength, bravery and courage to not be silent and always speak the truth in the front of a tyrant. The next question is to Karen Atiyah. We have seen, as you mentioned in your speech, that a lot of the American media outlets have written articles, have covered the heinous crime that was committed against Jamal Khashoggi. But was it enough? Do you not see that other media journalists have been under a lot of pressure, either for political reason or financial reason, not to write articles about the truth and what's happening inside Saudi Arabia? We've seen countless articles beautifying the image of the crown prince. So my question to you, has it been enough to highlight the murder of Jamal? And if not, what can American journalists and other journalists do?
I think there are multiple layers to that question. I think, first of all, as I said, I mean, Saudi Arabia, the image of Saudi Arabia in the sort of American consciousness has been oil, 9/11, terrorism, this idea of an opaque kingdom, which has made it so that the focus tends to be so much on those who are in power and what they're doing. They control, they have made it so that it is very difficult to kind of get a sense of the history and of the culture, which is why, again, Jamal was such an interesting find for us. I mean, I think, look, I think about this all the time. If what had happened to Jamal had been a simple, had not been so brutal, and had not been done in a way that crossed so many red lines, again, to send a hit team across borders, to do it in a diplomatic facility, has violated so many norms. And, you know, would it have been different if he had, just been driving in a car and had someone pull up beside him and pump a few bullets in the car and then drive away? That being said, I think that it's true, the brutality of it captured our attention, but I think also sent a very chilling message, right? And there are so many people who, in the aftermath of all of this, called me and said that they were terrified. This idea, it's changed how I think about terror and fear. And so to your question about writing and speaking about not just Saudi Arabia, I mean, we're talking about Saudi Arabia, but we have the UAE, right? And we have MBZ of the UAE also, we've seen all the reporting, I mean, being the model for this type of repression and fear. Basically, this brought into sharp relief what Jamal was talking about, that especially in the Arab world, there is not a lot of free media. We saw on Twitter, and we saw the articles spreading fake news, spreading conspiracies, people who were afraid to speak what they really thought about Jamal, a man who some of which knew personally, worked with for a long time, were afraid to speak in defense of his name and his honor. I think there was a reckoning to a certain degree of how do we get here? And how was it that line after line after line was crossed with MBS, beginning from Yemen to the kidnapping of a sitting prime minister in Lebanon, to cutting off diplomatic relations with Canada over tweets, to the blockade with Qatar. And I get this question a lot. Would a lot of this, under a different administration, under the Obama administration, would this have happened? Would we, well, not just would this have happened, but would the response to Jamal's killing be different? And I find it an interesting question, but I think the more important thing to think of is all the signs leading up to, all the steps of impunity, all of the escalations, the lines that were being crossed, would that have happened? I think that I think is something we really need to think about. Again, how did we get here? And I think as far as the media has done, again, like I said, I think there was a real sense of journalists, because Jamal worked with the Post, because Jamal knew a lot of people in Washington, a real sense that we needed to protect ourselves and our tribe. But if this happened to Jamal, who was so well known and had so many friends and had 1 million followers on Twitter, what could he do to me or to any of us, or what could any of these regimes do to any of us, especially if they had a good relationship with the United States and sold a lot of weapons to the US. So I think there's a real sense that we, again, we're fighting for ourselves. So I think going forward, I mean, I've been really, it would have compounded the tragedy if it was just myself and the Post and just a few of us talking about it. The fact that it became a global story, the fact that so many members of the press are here now, 9 months later, still very interested in this story is remarkable. That being said, we are pushing for action. We're trying to get the truth out there, but we are looking for these consequences because, again, our very lives are at stake with it. So I think that we've, I mean, for my part, you know, I'm writing a book as much as I, you know, can try to push this forward about this whole experience and what this says about my country and what this says about who we are, what sort of world we're building right now. And again, why did it have to take Jamal's murder for us to finally wake up? So I think that going forward, again, when it comes to justice, I hope that the right lessons are learned about, again, ceding, whether it's for access, journalistic access, whether it's for economic interests, that the moral, this has sounded a moral rallying cry, that we want, this is not the world we want, this is not the Arab world we want, and this is something, the fact that we're all sitting here, we're basically a transnational table, that my freedom, your freedom is tied up in the freedoms of others in Saudi Arabia, in the Middle East, in Rwanda, in anywhere where people, again, are being silenced for what they think and who they are. So, so that being said, I don't think the media is going to quit on this anytime soon. Just the other day, we keep questioning Kushner, Jared Kushner. We keep questioning Trump. This has uncovered a lot about how our current administration works. That might not have happened without Jamal's case. So again, some silver linings, but I'm worried. I'm worried about our future if we do not impose consequences for this crime.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you. As you said, it's a collective global issue, and if we don't stand against it, it might affect us all. Now we're going to go to the second round of questions, and my question to you, Anas, in your report, you called for a monitoring mechanism to be imposed on the Saudi authorities. Since this operation to kill Jamal was not exactly their first human rights violation, there's been support for this from European and several other states, but there are still other states that want to take advantage of organizational weaknesses in the Human Rights Court to block it. How do we get around this and ensure that the Council passes the resolutions needed in response to your report?
First of all, I didn't ask for that, but that's a good recommendation.
Okay, that's good.
So that's in March of this year, the Icelandic government has taken an initiative within the Human Rights Council, which is a body in Geneva that is set up to rule over human rights issue, and for the first time produced a joint statement adopted by, I don't know, 32 countries, maybe, I forgot the exact number, 31? 37, even better. So 37 adopted a joint statement on Saudi Arabia calling for, denouncing the situation in Saudi Arabia. The next step, and that was a very important benchmark, the next step logically will be a resolution at the Human Rights Council demanding a monitoring mechanism over the human rights situation in Saudi Arabia, which could take many shapes, one of which will be a regular report by the OHCHR, the UN body responsible for human rights, or it could be another form of reporting mechanism. So that could be a next step in September. I did not call for that in my report. I didn't make the specific request in my report, but I created the condition that will make it easier for Iceland or other states to get to that stage in the resolution. I didn't call for it because I was only focusing on one murder, and quotation mark, of course, and the human rights situation in Saudi Arabia is much broader. But Human Rights Watch has called for a monitoring mechanism. I believe Amnesty may have done the same, and there is a lot of demands for it. How do we get there? We go there the same way we got there in March, I guess, really convincing member states that it is in the best interest of the global community to ensure that a country as powerful as Saudi Arabia respect as much as possible some of the global rules and norms of behaviors, which currently they are not doing. So I think it was achieved in March. It could be achieved again in September. Will that be sufficient? No. I mean, I think the points you were making about that Hatice and Karen made around the capacity of the state of Saudi Arabia to sell its image abroad is something we need to reckon with. I mean, there are a number of companies, corporations, and firms around the world, but particularly in the UK or in the US, that are, in exchange of a lot of money, are prepared to produce and place very positive articles about Saudi Arabia and about its rulers. And that needs to be, I think, investigated better, and it needs to be denounced. I do deal with it a little bit in my report. I deal with the fact that PR firms that engage in this kind of exercise, whether it's with Saudi Arabia, UAE, or President Duterte in the Philippines, must have a code of conduct and an ethical framework within which they operate, and I don't think they do. And I think it's really important that the contract that they have been made public, that we are aware of which PR firm is doing what. Apparently, Saudi Arabia is actually contracting out dozens of PR firms, not just one, in order to multiply its impact. I think it's part of this information world we live in, which needs to be understood better. It's part also of the disinformation that we see online and offline. So if I have a call to make, I think all of those issues must be investigated alongside the follow-up to Mr. Khashoggi. But the working of this authoritarian government in the global information world, I think, is something that we don't understand well enough to respond to effectively enough, and that's something that needs to be done now.
Thank you very much, Ines. My final question for Khadija, then one more question to Karen. Khadija, you are a Turkish journalist. Jamal was a very well-respected Saudi journalist. Do you think that journalists have covered the incident fairly and enough?
Yani olayın gerçekleştiği günden bugüne kadar geçen süre içerisinde biliyorsunuz hem olayın oluş şekli hem uzun bir süre olayın gerçeğinin ne olduğunu anlayamamamızdan kaynaklı mesele çok uzun süre dünya gündeminde kaldı.
Since that event has happened till now, as you all know, that the event has been covered by the international press widely.
Ben yani Türkiye'nin hem hükümet olarak hem medya olarak bu meselenin dünyaya duyurulması noktasında izlediği yolun başarılı olduğunu gördüm bu süreçte.
I can see that Turkey as a government has
uluslararası medyanın çok yoğun ilgisinin olduğunu ve bu ilginin bütün dünyaya duyurulması noktasında çok etkili olduğunu düşünüyorum.
The international media has helped very much in letting the public know about this event.
Ama burada şunu söylemek lazım. Cemal sadece gazeteci olarak değil, olayın gerçekleşme şeklini düşündüğümüz zaman ve gerçekleştiği yerin bir diplomatik misyon olduğunu düşündüğümüz zaman bütün insanların vicdanını yaralayan çok böyle büyük bir insani tepki verilmesi gereken bir olay olduğu için dünya gündeminde çok uzun süre kalmasına neden oldu bu durum.
If you think about the importance of the event as well as diplomatically, I think as a conscious between people, this should stay in the media for a while.
Bu uluslararası programlara falan davet aldığım zaman, oralara gittiğim zaman mutlaka gazetecilerden şöyle bir şey duyuyorum. Cemal ile gazeteciler arasında mutlaka böyle bir özel ilişki olmuş oluyor. Yani ya yakın bir zamanda görüşmüş oluyorlar. Yani bütün gazetecilerle dünyanın birçok yerinde ikili yakın görüş alışverişinde bulunduğu ilişkileri olmuş ve bunları çok uzun yıllardır devam ettirmiş, çok uzun süreli meslektaşları var Cemal'in, bunu fark ettim. O yüzden bu meseleyi bir gazeteci olarak değil, insani bir misyon olarak da uzun süre gündemde tutmalarına herhalde bu vesile oldu.
Around the world, I have met many journalists who have met Jamal, and instead of just professionally as a journalist, they should make this stay in the international media, just as a human.
Son olarak ben bir şey söylemek istiyorum burada. Bundan sonraki süreç biliyorsunuz 9 ay oldu bugün. Bu ay itibariyle bu 9 ayın geçmesi ve şu ana kadar her ne kadar ciddi anlamda bir adım atılmasa da bundan sonra medya ve gazetecilere önemli görev düşüyor. Bununla ilgili bütün gelişmeleri yakından takip edip Cemal ve Cemal gibi olanları adalet yerine bulana kadar bu çalışmalara devam etmemiz gerekiyor.
It has been, as you all know, it has been 9 months since this month, and as long as there hasn't been any serious developments until now, but the next step is for the journalists to take the next step forwards.
Teşekkür ediyorum.
Thank you very much. Khadija. Yes, sure. Thank you very much for Khadija. I think there's a clear call for journalists to take action and maybe highlight the report even further. Just going back to Yahya to make comments about the suggested resolution and monitoring mechanism. Over to you, Yahya.
We asked for the mechanism in the Human Rights Council, like resolution or special rapporteur about Saudi Arabia, basically because the pressure from the Human Rights Council, it do some change. And there's always question from officials, from the Human Rights Council, from NGOs, is the pressure on Saudi Arabia do something? Yes, it do, but it's limited. After the joint statement from the 37 countries, there is temporary release for some women rights activists, and they stop the torture. This is something good to have some result from the pressure, but in the same time, they arrested 14 other people in the same week. So one of them is Salah al-Haidar. He's the son for Aziza al-Yusuf. They released Aziza and they arrested her son. That means we need to keep a pressure on the Saudi regime. Without this pressure, without the continuing in the pressure, they will keep continuing the violations. So we can't every time try to do advocacy with 37 countries to have joint statement from them to have very small change. So by have special procedure in the Human Rights Council, that could do some help. And I know right now there is 2 countries at least, UAE and Pakistan, they are trying to limitate the work inside the Human Rights Council. Not just these 2 countries, but they have projects inside the Human Rights Council to limitate the work inside the Human Rights Council. So the special procedure about Saudi Arabia, that's really could help. And this one of our demand in Al-Qist, and more than 40 NGOs, they signed with us. This is for you here. If you have meeting with officials or with media, and they ask you what to do to push forward for this demand that will do some change. Thank you.
Thank you, Yahya. Thank you. So sometimes it's not just about bringing these criminals to justice, but the outcomes of this resolution may lead to the release of so many imprisoned, though others might be put in prison afterward. But thank you, Yahya. Now, my final question to Karen, then we'll go for 10 minutes break, then the floor will be open for questions. Karen, you are a US citizen. Jamal is a Saudi citizen, but he worked for the Washington Post. He is a US resident. Has the US protected Jamal, yes or no? And what can it be done?
I mean, as it stands 9 months later, I feel very disappointed and betrayed by my government, and betrayed by not just but by this administration very specifically. And this administration has Jamal's in not doing anything. They will have not only Jamal's blood on their hands, but the potential for so many others. I mean, that's how high the stakes are. And I think if you go back even to Jamal's writings, and he said, again, a lot of the escalatory steps under this new regime in Saudi Arabia got a green light from the Trump administration. So that being said, the one advantage we do have, or I do have as a US citizen, are institutions and are mechanisms by which we can hold leaders accountable and by which we can write to lawmakers, pressure lawmakers to support certain legislation, and very frankly, vote these leaders out. Make them lose their jobs. Because, again, we, in the name of freedom and in the name of our values, America has claimed to have spilled so much blood to be able to protect people like ourselves and Jamal. So for me as an American, I speak to the American people, what sort of America do we want? And I think if you poll a lot of Americans, that they still very much believe in our country as being one that is a force for good in the world. And right now, we have a situation where we have an administration that is enabling dictators, that is prioritizing, or at least making explicit arms sales and deals in money over lives. And it is, that being said, I think to a certain extent, you know, I'm glad Jamal chose the Washington Post. You know, as I perhaps tweeted in sadness and anger in the very early days, you know, they messed with the wrong paper. They messed with the wrong editor. And as I said before, this is a fight for the soul of who we are as not just Americans, but for anybody who cares about just the very basic value of human life, and that you have your life matters. And Jamal's life mattered before this happened and still continues to matter. So that being said, you know, I, again, think that it's not easy to not lose hope sometimes. When you look at the scale of how much money, how much influence, how much these structures seem so entrenched. And I have people who will tell me, that's just how the Middle East is. That's just the region. They just chew their people up and spit them out. That's just how Washington is. It's just how it goes, you know. And for me, perhaps it's whatever. If it's naive, if it's not, I'm like, this is messed up. This is not. Why should we be told to accept this? And so with that said, I think people are waking up to that. It might be slow, and we might not see certain forms of what we would traditionally see as justice in the next year, maybe not in the next 5 years, maybe not in the next 10. But that's why I think this is so important, because this is about who we are as global citizens and what responsibility do we have to our fellow human beings. I really see it as that sort of basic. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Karen. Thank you. Now, what we would like to do is that we have until 8:05 a break for tea and coffee and biscuit. So if I may ask you please to come back to the hall 8:05. So thank you very much everyone for coming back after the break. So now we will open the floor for questions to Aeneas and Karen and Khadija. If I may ask you please to say your name and what channel you're from and whom you're directing the question to. We will take 3 questions, answer them, then we'll take another round of questions. So the floor is open. We've got Nassim here, and we've got the gentleman there. Okay, so Nassim.
Hi, this is Nassim from Memo Middle East Monitor. I have a question for Agnes. So was there any resistance to you investigating this from the Saudis, from the US, and I would say from the UN as well? Because I've not really seen any statement from the Secretary General, so I was wondering if there was any resistance to your investigation.
Okay, then the second question. Okay, then the final question here, please.
For Dr. Agnes.
Sorry, can you introduce yourself and what channel you're from?
I am Osama Rushdie. I was a former member for National Council for Human Rights in Egypt. I am Egyptian. So I will talk about another murder case in Egypt for Dr. Mohammed Morsi, the former president of Egypt. Mrs. Michelle Bachelet, she called for investigation about the murder for Dr. Morsi. Will you open an investigation like your great investigation about Mr. Khashoggi? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Osama. So if we just ask Agnes to answer the question.
Yes, quickly. So the cooperation from Saudi Arabia was nil. I will not say that they took steps to make it impossible for me to do my work. They simply did not cooperate. So I wrote to them many times. I sent them substantive letters, as we do as special rapporteur, with a large number of questions related to what they were doing. At some point, they promised that they will respond, and then they never did. I asked for a mission there. I asked to meet with their prosecutor and their investigators. That was rejected by the absence of reply. So they didn't nominally reject it. In public statement, they kept to the charade that this was not an international matter, but a domestic issue, and the national sovereignty prevailed. With regard to the United Nations, I didn't get a great deal of support, but I will not say that I was, that it, that my work was hampered. No one suggested within the UN, at least, that the mission, that the inquiry was outside my mandate. Everyone I spoke with within the UN acknowledged that it was part of that my mandate. Some people questioned, though, whether it was strategic to use the mandate in that fashion. So I will not say that I got hampered or stopped, but doesn't mean I got a great deal of support. Within the United States, I got a lot of support from the Congress in terms of people to speak with at the highest level. From the Senate, in the US State Department, I was unable to speak with the CIA on or off record, or with any other members of the White administration. I did ask as well to speak with the Department of Justice individuals and so on. I did get a large meeting at some stage where there were many individuals there that represented different sides of the administration. So I will say, you know, the US was not at the top of the cooperation chain. On the other hand, they also did not cooperate. They did the minimum to keep them within the remit of what is being expected of a Western government. They didn't go beyond that. The Congress and the Senate, on the other hand, I think were very supportive and tried to do as much as they could under the US law. I have to remind us as well that anyone sharing the CIA briefing, for instance, on the responsibilities of the Crown Prince could face very high punishment, because this is a direct violation of the laws related to national security. So the risk attached with speaking too much in the absence of a proper judicial context, I completely acknowledge, and I will be the last one who will want people to take this kind of risk. This is why in my report I am asking for declassification or for a discussion, a public discussion at the Congress where that information can be made public. I think, did I respond to your question more or less? Yeah. I'm glad to hear, I think you had told me that before, somebody did tell me that the Crown Prince in private said it happened under my watch. I haven't heard that being said publicly. I haven't heard any of the ministers that have taken a stand publicly on the killing of Mr. Khashoggi reiterate the fact that the Crown Prince is taking responsibility for the killing because it happened under his watch, which is part of what an investigation into the extent of individuals' responsibility within the state will include. So while I'm glad that he has said that in private, I will certainly welcome far more public acknowledgement of that level of responsibilities, and indeed it will be a reflection of a far more mature leadership than so far we have seen. And yes, the Turkish government gave me access to the recording, at least to some of it. As I have pointed out in my report, the Turkey government has far more recording than what I listened to. I hope that more will be made public by Turkey itself, maybe in the context of a public inquest or whenever the public prosecutor of Turkey is ready to move forward with his indictment. There is also a great deal of information there that has not been made public, and truth-telling, either coming from Turkey, from Saudi Arabia, or from the United States, must be part of what we're asking for. With regard to the killing of President Morsi, I could not quite undertake the same investigation because in the case of the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, I had access to Turkey. I had access to a lot of information in Turkey, and I had access to at least one party to the affair, to the crisis. In the case of Egypt, I could not go to Egypt to do the investigation. However, as a special rapporteur, there is a lot I can do without conducting an inquiry. I certainly can receive information from families, lawyers, other people who were imprisoned at the time or with President Morsi, all of which can become part of a a substantial letter, which could be, I've sent letters to government that were 15-page long, so mini report, where I lay out all the allegations that I have received regarding the possibility that Mr. President Morsi died as a result of bad treatment and lack of care and access to medical assistance, with a set of questions. When I send that letter to the authorities, they then have 60 days to respond before my own letter is made public. So those are some of the steps I am considering. I should just say that I also welcome very much the call by Michelle Bachelet, and I hope that the OHCHR will undertake its own investigation into the killing, or maybe that the UN within the Human Rights Council, the General Assembly, or the Secretary General could take some steps in that direction.
Thank you very much, Agnes. We will take one round of questions. So if you want to raise your hand, we've got this gentleman here, and then Drury, and the question. If you have the question there, Imran at the back. So we've got these three. Then we'll come back to those who asked questions already if we have time. Okay, your name,
Hi,
organization.
I'm Osama Gawish. I'm a TV presenter at Al Hiwar channel, Egyptian journalist, and I was a spokesman of Jamal Khashoggi's Friends campaign here in London. First of all, thanks for Yahya for organizing this panel. Thanks for Sahar for hosting. And I have two questions, one for Anis and one for Karen. My question for Anis, a week after your report, Crown Prince went to the G20 and he had a very warm welcoming from President Trump, and Trump escaped from any question about Khashoggi's case. And days after this, Adel Jubeir appeared with Kristen Amanpour on CNN, and he didn't accept anything of your report and said this is an internal case and it's belonged to Saudi's judiciary, and no one have the right to speak about this, and we have to wait until the investigation. So my question to you is about how your report have the strong impact to put a real pressure on such an authoritarian regime. This is my question for Anis. My question to Karen, as a journalist, it's a shame. We have used to listen to the same accusation about the Washington Post, about the US media, from our media, belongs to our authoritarian regime in the Middle East, as well as the accusation from the President Trump to you. Fake news, enemies of the people, and all of these accusations. You mentioned our fight is not for just Jamal Khashoggi, is about the freedom of speech and the freedom of journalists. Now you have an upcoming election next year. The question is how Khashoggi's murder have the proper impact, and how could change the American opinion about elect President Trump or not, because Trump used his speech, America's first, and I need jobs, and Saudi Arabia giving the money, all of these. If American people stand for their values or stand for Trump jobs and America first.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I may ask to make your question a bit short and concise. We've got Drury here and the gentleman at the back.
I'm Drury Dyke from the Rights Realization Center, a human rights NGO. A really quick question about strategy on the Human Rights Council. We saw, you've made reference to, Agnes made reference to the joint statement, 37 countries, some out of the last Human Rights Council. It's unlikely that Iceland will step forward on this occasion. Can we use the upcoming Global Media Freedom event co-hosted by Canada and the UK to approach the Canadians and possibly the Australians to advance a proposal for a resolution at the next Human Rights Council? That's directed to Yahya and Agnes. Second, very quick question. We have people in this room from all over the Gulf, save perhaps from Qatar. Karen, what would you say to other people in the Gulf? We're here for a Saudi Arabia-focused event, but there are people here from Kuwait, from Bahrain, from other countries. What what message do we give to them about, does the path of a better human rights in the Gulf pass through Riyadh?
Thank you. Then the gentleman there at the back.
Hi, my name is Louis Al-Samari. I'm an ex-British lawyer currently working in media and entertainment in Los Angeles. My question is to the Honorable Lady Agnes. Regarding leverage to enforce indictments against such individuals, what efforts are you making to have the powers within Europe, France and Germany, to use economic leverage in order to strengthen the legitimacy of the ICC, so that when you present a viable indictment, it can be respected and the ICC is legitimized and can be recognized and enforced? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the first question to you, Agnes, about the G20.
Yes, so I think we've already mentioned the fact that the G20 was a disappointment. I don't know what happened during the discussion, but clearly the picture at the end was spoke a million. The handshake between Donald Trump and MBS was very unwelcome in my view. Why did he do it, Donald Trump? I think it's an interesting question, because I can't imagine that he would have gotten much leverage in his own country with that handshake. So I don't know. It's it surprised me. I mean, the costs associated with the handshake were much greater than the gains. I think something to follow up. The real pressure on authoritarian regime, we have been at it for many decades. So there is nothing new in wanting an authoritarian regime to change and shift in its behavior. What is new right now is that the pressure points are few and in between. In the past, they may not have been always very reliable, but at least we had some European states, we had the US, we had Canada, and we could play one against the other, the East against the West, the South against the North, and so on. Right now, the pressure points are much less in numbers and much weaker in their strengths. What does that mean? It means that we, as I was pointing out, I think we have a real challenge. We need to reinvent ourselves and reinvent how we campaign and how we work on a state of this nature. I think that in the case of Saudi Arabia, what is really interesting and should be leveraged better and maximized is the fact that we are working with public opinion. In the case of Egypt, the public opinion is nowhere to be seen. Internationally, for some reason, Egypt has fallen off the cliff of international attention in spite of the incredible level of violations in the country. In the case of Saudi Arabia, that's not the case. There is an international public opinion that is more or less outraged, that understand the economic might of Saudi Arabia, but for some reason does not care so much about it, which is really unusual in those days and age. How do we work with this public opinion that is quite angry with the way Saudi Arabia is behaving and with the way our elected officials are behaving vis-à-vis Saudi Arabia? So that's one thing I think we really need to think about and leverage that public opinion, maximize it, use it as much as possible. Second, as I've already mentioned, parliaments in many of those countries, including in the United States, have taken great stand against that does not mean that they are not prepared to continue doing so. So it's not an immediate gain, but it is certainly, to me, when I look at the landscape of actors, I see far more actors prepared to go to fight against Saudi Arabia than I see actors ready to defend Saudi Arabia, at least publicly. So that should give us courage and hope to continue to call on our elected officials to do the right thing, to call on the media to continue to report, to call on the corporate actors to abide by corporate social responsibilities, and so on and so forth. We've got to take heart in the fact that this is not a lost, it's not lost at all, and that the last 9 months have actually shown A, our persistence, B, our resilience, and 3, our determination. And that needs to continue. I see no reason why it should stop. And I see no reason why we can't, at some point, have a greater impact than we've had so far. But we've had some impact. Again, I think we need to be very determined to not to only highlight where we are not winning, because there has been a lot of successes. The fact that the killing of Jamal Khashoggi is still making the news, the fact that there are dozens of journalists here, the fact that there are far more journalists who wants to do a public documentary, who wants to do a movie, who wants to write a book. I mean, all of that means his fiancée is ready to continue the fight at the international scale. All of those things are winnings. All of those things are gains for us as an international human rights community, and we must find pride in it, and we must celebrate it, because that's what is going to annoy the hell out of them, and be the mosquito in the tent that they can't ever get rid of.
Thank you very much, Agnes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Agnes. The question is to Karen. After that, it was about the accusation from Trump. What are the possibilities of in the next coming elections to put more pressure on Khashoggi's murder?
Well, first of all, before I answered that question, back to Agnes's point about again, accountability and about truth-telling. I mean, there's active lawsuits by the Open Society Initiative to compel the government to release, under the FOIA Act, to release any relevant documents related to Khashoggi's case, and that includes the State Department, that includes the CIA. So there are legal steps that are being taken, and other means that people are using to fight the government's desire to keep this under the rug, and for them to uncover this in a quick manner. So I just want to, again, as far as winnings, or as far as multiple fronts on this battle, I just wanted to highlight that. Again, 2020 is an opportunity. I think to your example about Christiane Amanpour challenging Abu al-Jaber, to the point about the fact that journalists are still pushing questions on the Trump administration or Trump himself about this is important. And I think that there is a desire to keep this up. And honestly, we in the media shouldn't be shy about it. We have a lot of power to help frame debates and help frame narratives. And I honestly think that it comes down to having questions about recalibrating the U.S.-Saudi relationship as a foreign policy issue. Asking the Democratic candidates what their stance on it is extremely important. And Bernie Sanders already has actually spoken out about this. That's just who comes to mind right now at this second. But we have an opportunity at town halls, at social media events, that this should still be front of mind for my colleagues in the journalism field, to put this forth as an opportunity, again, to have a public debate about this. And I think that, again, this is a part of articulating the vision that each of the candidates have for America and the relationships that we should be having with our, so-called allies. And I think to a certain extent, it is notable to see that countries like Germany, at the very least, made moves to suspend arms sales. It is notable that I think those things, again, back to what Agnes said, is to show that there are models for having some form of morality in a foreign policy approach. So, I mean, that all being said, I think that's where we have an opportunity, and that's where we can articulate a certain vision. And even back to Wins, I still think that you still see that the pressure over the Khashoggi case, again, it's not just government, it's not just sort of Washington politics. I mean, I think I was just reading on my phone during the break that an hour ago, the rapper Nicki Minaj has pulled out of her upcoming concert on July 18th. Yes.
That's
said
a
that.
victory.
Yeah. And I have so much to say about how hip hop used to be the language of liberation and of freedom and of fighting the power. And she said, I believe in her statement, that she wants to send a message that she stands with the women of Saudi Arabia. And I think that there are, again, America, when we talk about American power, it is also cultural power. It is also, these figures that have influence that Saudi Arabia has wanted to try to court in order to, as they call, art wash the regime. That there have been a number of them that have made choices to pull out. So I think that there are other pressure points. Again, this is 8 months after Jamal's killing. That there are ways that various sectors of American sort of society and culture and power can work to not buy into this charade. That there's more to life than just earning a buck, basically. I don't know if you want me to take the other question directed at me,
I think it's the next question by Rory to Agnes. Okay. If that's okay, because also we're short on time. Agnes, the question was about the strategy of the human rights. And
I think it's for Yara.
Okay.
Yes, let the man speak.
Okay.
Okay, after you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I will be there for 2 days, and I will ask, please, can you do something in September? I think June is too late, but let's begin now to work for the Human Rights Council meets 3 times a year, in March, in June, and September. There is a meeting right now, but it's too late to get anything in motion. But I think for the September meeting, there is time to prepare so that we can raise awareness within the 47 states to be prepared to adopt a resolution that will be very much argued against by a number of states, including from the OIC and maybe others. I think in that conflict, in that process, Latin America is very important, and Africa. If I just take my example, during the presentation at the Human Rights Council, the African Union made a statement which was actually very balanced in favor of my report. Latin America supported the report wholeheartedly. The countries that opposed the report were UAE, Jordan, Tunisia, Mauritania, Oman, and Egypt. Strangely enough, Pakistan did not. I have to say that, which is very interesting. India did not. So some of the non-aligned not support Saudi Arabia, which they usually do against UN intrusion into so-called national sovereignty territories. So there were interesting dynamics taking place politically within the Human Rights Council. I could not quite analyze them very well, but I think there is something to work with there, and something that needs to be encouraged as well, including through strong signs and vocal signs from the other states, such as Canada, France, the UK, and so on, vis-à-vis Africa, Latin America, and some of the Asian states that have taken, I will not say that they have, gone against Saudi Arabia, but the mere fact that they have not supported Saudi Arabia is already a victory for us, absolutely. And that's where, that's what we need to work with.
Thank you very much, Agnes. Yahya, is there anything to add on this?
I think I shouldn't add anything.
Okay.
To save the time for the great panelists here and also for the great audience here to ask. But just one point regarding to the question from Duri. If we can start action from UK and ask UK to start, that will be really powerful, because there is, to be honest, there is lots of countries around the world. When we talk to them, they are asking about 3 countries in Europe, and they ask what their reaction. Are they going to sign? Are they going to do something? So if we start from one of these 3 countries, that will be powerful, if we can.
Thank you very much, Yahya. Then we have the final question, and then I might have to end it. So final question was about the possibility of creating economic leverage on the ICC to Agnes first, if we answer this question.
The ICC has no role to play here. It is an international crime, but it does not meet the seriousness that is required for the ICC to take it on. So it could not become an ICC case. So that's it. Not the ICC, the International Criminal Court, is not an option to try those responsible for the killing, including possibly high-level officials. But I think if you are asking at a more general level, how can we, we need to, the ICC has not gotten a lot of good publicity recently, and we acknowledge its limitations. On the other hand, it is an important symbol of a global community that is ready to reckon with these worst violations. So we can work with the limitations, we can try to address them, and they will be addressed bit by bit. In many ways, it's a young institution, and I personally always call for a ratification of the International Criminal Court statute. But in this case, it doesn't have a role to play.
Okay, thank you very much, Agnes. We will take one more last question, and then we will end it. So the gentleman there.
Thank you very much for Agnes for your presentation, and Yahya for the panel. My question is, you said you sent regarding the
Sorry, can I ask your name and what channel from?
Sorry. My name is Ahmed Al-Attar. I'm Egyptian human rights researcher and activist, and my organization's name Egyptian Coordination for Rights and Freedoms.
Okay.
We are based in Cairo. And my question to you, Agnes, you said you sent a report or a letter to Egyptian authority regarding Mr. Morsi death. Did you ask for visit, or you just asked for inquiries? And if you asked for a visit, did you have any reply from the Egyptian authorities? And if you ask for a visit and the Egyptian authority refused to answer your visit or allow you to visit, What shall we do next? Thank you.
Okay. I think I will take one question from here. Okay, we've got really 10 minutes, so if, Agnes, if it's possible to make the answers concise from now on, because we've got 10 minutes.
I have an ongoing request to visit Egypt, but I have not renewed it with specific reference to the death of President Morsi. But at the moment, I have not received any positive response from Egypt, although I should say that Egypt has welcomed the Special Rapporteur on the right to housing in recent months. It didn't go very well for her and for the people who met with her because there were reprisals against them. And so that's where we are at the moment.
Thank you, Agnes. Question here.
المحامي سلطان العبدلي، ناشط سعودي مقيم في لندن. السؤال، طبعا العالم قال كلمته في قضية خاشقجي، ولا نستطيع حينما نتكلم عن هذه القضية أن نغفل جانب العاطفة في الموقف الرعيب والمشهد الذي صوره التقرير ونقل إلينا من خلال تلك التسريبات المخجلة الحقيقة أن تكون صادرة من بلدنا ومن قيادته التي انتزت على الحكم غصبا وجورا.
السؤال ايش السؤال؟
السؤال طبعا بعد شعوبنا تسأل، تقول العالم قال كلمته منظمات وأحرار وكذلك المخلصين في العالم ولجان حقوق الإنسان ومنظماته، لكن ماذا عن تلك الحكومات الغربية وفي مقدمتها حكومة ترامب التي ربما سهلت بصمتها على محمد بن سلمان الذي يمارس إرهاب الدولة؟ ماذا عن أمريكا التي تصدر وتقول للعالم أننا نصدر حقوق الإنسان ونصدر الحرية ونصدر الديمقراطية والشفافية، وهي تصمت على هذا محمد بن سلمان لقاء حفنة يسيرة من المليارات ومن صفقات الأسلحة؟ هذا سؤال شعبنا. هناك أصدقاء لجمال خاشقجي أيضا يسألون في جيش النحل، يقولون ماذا صنعت الحكومة التركية قيادة وقانونا في تركيا لقاء هذه الجريمة البشعة؟ أيضا نسأل السيدة كلمار، نقول ماذا بعد هذا التقرير؟ والسلام عليكم.
شكرا جزيلا. Just to translate the question. The question was by Sultan Al-Abdali. He is a Saudi human rights activist, and he's saying that on behalf of Saudi people, the world has said its word against the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, who agitated the emotion of many people. His question was what, and I think we have answered it already, is what has done Trump's state, what has it, or administration, what has it done to stop the Saudi-sponsored terrorism in terms of the arms deals, in terms of their political relationship with Saudi, and another question in relation to what we call them, the electronic bees, in response to the electronic flies who do the trolls in the social media. The electronic bees are asking the question whether the Turkish government has done enough, and is it possible to release the rest of the recording. So maybe the first, about I think that's to Karen, the question, maybe about the state-sponsored terrorism and the relationship. And if you make it short, because I think we have answered it, but just if there's anything to add.
I mean, I think adding to the outrageousness of the response to the outrage over Khashoggi's murder, I mean, the fact that the administration, the Newsbrook, that the administration made moves to sell nuclear energy to Saudi Arabia also just, again, shows this determination to go forward, not just business as usual, but even, I think, propping up the potential for even more abuses. Even more, it sort of read like almost still rewarding, right? This regime. So on that, I mean, again, I would follow Agnes's call as far as the stopping of the arms. I think for a lot of Americans, that was a very easy no-brainer, especially considering our Senate rules on war and on authorization. That being said, I also think that we need to think about the sale of surveillance technology to this regimes and others like it. We haven't talked about it much, but the Pegasus software that was used to hack Jamal and other figures like him should be considered as a weapon, I think. And so I think that there's still so much more that we need to do as far as making a part of our national discourse on our exportation of these weapons as part of this discussion.
Thank you, Karen. أترجم الإجابة بسرعة أنه هناك إمكانية لوضع ضغوط لمنع بيع الأسلحة ومنها أيضا الأدوات التجسسية، لكن في إمكانية لكن لم يحصل حتى الآن. الآن Agnes, I think this question, it was actually from the electronic bees in the social media, whether the Turkish government will release any more recording to you anytime soon, and we hopefully will end it.
You know, I think we need just to pursue a little bit the matter. Yes, the White House and Donald Trump has done all he can to protect Saudi Arabia against really demands originating from many parts within the international community. But we also must acknowledge that the US is not just Donald Trump. And I think within the US, to me, there is a far greater hope for real accountability to happen. The Congress and the Senate, on a bipartisan basis, have taken steps that no other parliaments have so far, and that must be really highlighted and encouraged. There are ongoing, or there will be legal cases in the US. So the institutions, the democratic institutions within the US are really working for accountability in Saudi Arabia. What's not working is the presidential system and the way the executive is using aspect of the constitution to overrule what the parliament has decided. That's what I was highlighting earlier in terms of democratic deficit. The behavior of Donald Trump to protect Saudi Arabia is really undermining our own democratic values, and that's very dangerous. Now, with regard to Turkey, no, Turkey needs to make the rest of the recording public. At least, look, those recordings are super sensitive. We don't know which method was used. We don't know which source they relied upon. God knows, we don't even know whether they were Turkish. Huh? So, no, just seriously, we know nothing. I know nothing. Maybe CIA knows, I don't. And intelligence agencies will be extra careful not to what is called burning its sources and not to burn its technology. So I think what they are going to make public is they will make public whatever will not divulgate how they captured those recordings. That is why we probably are not ever going to get everything. But I suspect there is a bit more that they can share. Plus, there may be also part of the recording that are completely irrelevant to Mr. Khashoggi's and that are nobody's business really, and not even Turkish business. So there are a range of reasons reasonable reasons as to why we should not get everything, but we need to get more, a little bit more or a great deal more, until and unless Turkey has demonstrated that what they hold cannot be made public because it will undermine national security. So far they have said nothing like this. So my expectation is that more will be made public, knowing though that maybe not everything.
Thank you very much. Agnes, quick translation. المعلومات لم تصرح بها الحكومة التركية لأنها حساسة جدا ولا تريد أن تصرح عن مصدر هذه المعلومات وتحرقها، لكن هناك احتمال كبير أنها ستصرح ببعض هذه التسجيلات. وأيضا صرحت أغنس أنه نعم إدارة ترامب لم تساعد في الضغط على الحكومة السعودية، لكن أمريكا هي دولة مؤسسات وهناك مجال كبير للمحاسبة. So thank you very much everyone for coming to this event. I really hope that you have taken so many actions from it, and also I would like you to support this event by sharing it in the social media. Thank you very much to Khadija Jenkiz, Agnes Kalamad, and Karen Atiyah, and Yahya Asiri. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to our amazing volunteers who came last minute to support us today. Thank you very much.
Please don't forget to support the Saudi heroes behind the bars. You can scan the barcode on the walls here. أهلا وسهلا.